I will start this panel with a quote. A woman is the full circle. Within her is the power to create, nurture, and transform. Perimenopause, you all know, is the menopausal transition period in this estrous staging, and it lasts for just 16 to 11 years, 4 to 11 years. Now in this slide, important to remember is always exclude the pregnancy first. Otherwise, you all know about this. Now, AUB impacts up to 30% of the women at some time in their lives. We all know that this is a menstrual problem, but important is it also definitely affect the quality of life. And here I want to emphasize that about 60% of the women undergo hysterectomy within 5 years from the diagnosis, and the tragedy is that in histopathological examination 1/3 of the uterus are normal. तो ये अपने लिए बहुत दुख की बात है. Pattern is chronic and acute, you all know. Now, to avoid the confusion in the terminology, FIGO has introduced system 1 just for the standardization of the term. And we were using, aap sabko yaad hoga, menorrhagia, metrorrhagia. Now these are replaced by heavy menstrual bleeding and intermenstrual bleeding. And the frequency is considered normal when it is between 24 to 38 days. Now they are very liberal. Less than 8 days is normal duration, and variation up to 7 to 10 days is normal, and flow is determined by the patient here. Patient बोलेगी ज़्यादा है मतलब ज़्यादा है. So this is again important in this system. And intermenstrual bleeding may be random or cyclic. Random occur because of the surface bleeding, like in carcinoma cervix or submucous polyp. We all know about the palm coin. It makes our job easier. It helps in the uniform and evaluation of the case of abnormal uterine bleeding. These are the causes, not going into the detail. Now this is again important, FIGO notation. It is basically the method of uniform documentation. So everyone understand the same. अगर आपने लिखा है P0 means polyp नहीं है, L1 submucous or other types, so it is given 1. And if you have not yet assessed, then give the query. So this is also a very good system for notation of the causes. Now coming to the case 1. A 42-year-old obese woman presents with heavy menstrual bleeding since 3 years. Her weight is 82 kgs and she has type 2 diabetes mellitus controlled on medication. There is no history of hypertension or hypothyroidism. PS and PV examination is unremarkable. Transvaginal USG shows UCL of 8 cm and endometrial thickness of 15 mm. Both ovaries shows clear cyst and there is no free fluid seen. Now what is the next step? Vijay Lakshmi ma'am.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be in this panel. Thank you very much. Here, of course, it's a perimenopausal lady and she is already having regular periods, though they are heavy. So, and with your findings of transvaginal and transabdominal findings, and you have already given me ultrasound findings as well, which again, the 8 centimeter is okay. Not too big for this age, but endometrial thickness of 15 mm is slightly more, because even in the ovulatory cycles and in cycles, as long as she is cycling, I think the endometrial thickness generally after 10 we consider that as a little thicker, and of course postmenopausal we consider even more beyond 3. So the next step is to think of what could be in the endometrium, and we should be able to do the endometrium sampling. And of course here the risk factors are there, the diabetic status is there,
yes.
And this. So I will proceed with further this thing, and of course with the labs and everything.
So rightly said, here the tissue is the issue. You know, in this, tissue is the issue.
Tissue is the issue, yeah.
What are the recommendations for endometrial sampling for histopathological examination, Dr. Kartika?
So, in a patient more than 40 years, if they are having heavy menstrual bleeding, endometrial sampling is indicated. In women less than 40 years, wherever they are having risk factors for endometrial carcinoma, like PCOS, obesity, irregular cycles, and they are not responding to our medical management. Younger age group, we usually start them on medical management. So, if they are not responding to medical management, there also endometrial sampling is advised. And the preferred method is endometrial aspiration. That is outpatient procedure, pupil biopsy can be taken. But in selected cases, that is wherever there is a focal lesion, hysteroscopy will be a better choice.
Thank you so much. But what the Foxy GCPR says now, even more less than 35 year with risk factor or more than 35 years, if you are in doubt, you can go for endometrial sampling. So what is the role of, again, I want to emphasize one thing here, not only the thickness, morphology is also important of the endometrium, you know. IATA classification, you know about that also. What is the role of hysteroscopy, Dr. Nishi?
Ma'am, in today's era, hysteroscopy has a very good, important role because it gives us a opportunity to see, decide, and treat. And mostly in the cases where the cause is not known, we are considering AUB-E, palm coin E classification. E is the cause. In that case, we have, if we go for hysteroscopy, we can see and we can decide and treat the cause there and then. And even if we are looking for sampling, if there is a focal lesion, hysteroscopy is most helpful.
And sometimes what happens in the medical college report kya aati hai? Endometrium sample is insufficient or atrophic. The better if you are suspecting in TVS, you are seeing this much endometrial thickness, then again go for hysteroscopy.
I think we have come out of era of blind DNCs.
Yes.
I think either it has to be under
Madam,
vision.
still there is role of endometrial people and
Yeah,
aspiration.
there is,
OPD
because
procedure.
people covers in the
Because
OP,
they are not invasive.
obviously it reduces the
Yes, ma'am.
And office hysteroscopy is not always present in all
Yes,
those sources.
true. So now the report comes out to be the patient shows endometrial hyperplasia without atypia. So Dr. Chitra, what is endometrial hyperplasia and what is the recent classification? एक और माइक दे दो प्लीज. अच्छा. Yes, now Dr. Chitra.
Endometrial hyperplasia is defined as irregular proliferation of the endometrial glands with an increase in the gland to stroma ratio when compared with the proliferative endometrium.
And what about the recent classification?
It's classified into endometrial hyperplasia with atypia and atypical hyperplasia.
Without atypia. So rightly said, previously the classification was morphology based also, whether it is simple or complex, again divided into with atypia and without atypia. And this atypical hyperplasia, basically it corresponds to EIN because of the pre-malignant, chances of malignancy in these cases as a pre-malignant condition. So what are the risk factors, Dr. Shalini?
So there are various risk factors. First of all, BMI, the habitus of the woman, the associated factors along with increased BMI. Then any condition which is leading to hyperestrogenism, like she is having history of PCOS, or in perimenopause already itself physiological hyperestrogenism and shift in the hormonal things are there. Then if she is having history of hypertension, diabetes, gallbladder stones, if she is on any drugs like tamoxifen, or if she has put on HRT, any genetic factors like any mutations in KRAS gene or PTEN gene, if she is a case of hyperplasia, or if we can get these kind of mutation, we should keep in mind, we should ask the patient for family history.
Yes.
Any HER2 new receptors, abnormal P53 receptors. And sometimes it has also been observed that the immunocompromised patients or patients having some chronic infections in their body, they are more prone for endometrial hyperplasias. So they have 2 to 3 times more risk. Various studies and retrospective analysis have been done in renal graft patients. So it has been observed.
So yes, you have basically rightly said all the causes except some ovarian tumors.
Yes.
They should also be excluded,
Yeah,
like
they-
granulosa cell tumor.
Granulosa, they have 40% chance
Yes, there are 40% chances. What should be the initial management of hyperplasia without atypia, Dr. Mamta?
Thank you, madam. Since she is 40 years old and already has 2 risk factors, that is, she's diabetic and obese, and she has more chance of getting into more hyperplasia. So first thing that is important is counseling, because she might be afraid of cancer. We should counsel her that the progression to endometrial cancer is less than 5% over a period of 20 years. And coexistent carcinoma is also less than 1%. So that is the reason she should not be afraid of this. Since she has obesity, we should counsel her to reduce her weight and also control her
It's a
diabetes.
modifiable risk factor. Yes,
Lifestyle
right.
management is important. And we should also counsel her that even if we do not treat, it might regress. Normal spontaneous regression might be there. But with medication, spontaneous regression, histological
Rate is
regression, and symptomatic remission is quicker and more effective. That is the reason the first line of treatment will be, for me, it is LNZ-IUS.
Right.
It is the best thing. And if the woman doesn't want to go for LNZ-IUS, then only continuous progesterone therapy should be given.
Yes, it was rightly said, counseling followed by reduction of modifiable risk factors and followed by LNG-IUS. And if oral progesterone, then it should be continuous, not
continuous.
cyclic. So what should be the duration of follow-up, Dr. Shelley?
So the duration of follow-up, if we get 2 consecutive reports to be normal, it's 6 months. So we need to repeat the report even if we get it as normal after 6 months. And we can only then tell her that it's okay if you come annually after that. And the follow-up also has to be just histopathological but also ultrasound. So that is a more approachable method and convenient for the patient.
Right. So endometrial sampling should be done every 6 monthly in the case of without ATP.
Without ATP.
Right. And higher regression rate with at least continue the progesterone
LNG,
for
yes.
6 months.
6
and if
months.
on LNG, then you
it
can
is
continue
for 6
more time.
months.
So what is the surgical management? When is the surgical management? What are the indications when it is appropriate? Dr. Bharti.
Very good afternoon to all of you. The best management for perimenopausal AUB is medical management, either by IUS, that LNG-IUS, or by oral progesterone. But there are few indications where hysterectomy is needed. First, very important is persistence of symptoms. In spite of giving medical management, if there is irregular bleeding PV or intermenstrual bleeding, then
So
it is
not
one of the
responding.
indicators, which is not responding to medical treatment. And even after giving medical treatment, if there is no regression of histology of endometrium, or there is progression of histology of endometrium. This is the third indication. Then one more, when patient is not willing for conservative management. In our institute, बहुत सारे patient तो ऐसे होते हैं जो medical management लेके आते हैं, तो उनका ultimate ये कि मैडम आप तो बच्चेदानी ही निकाल दो.
They don't
like
want
this.
basically long-term.
हाँ, so long-term follow-up, endometrial biopsy, sonography, they are not willing. So if patient is not willing for this conservative management, then we have to go for this.
Which operation you will like to do?
It is total hysterectomy. If laparoscopy facility is available, then laparoscopic. If not, then by laparotomy or
So
by
at
open
least
method.
bilateral self-injectomy should be
Yes,
done
yes,
and
yeah.
decide about
to
the
prevent the
ovary.
epithelial ovarian
As
cancer,
per the
bilateral.
age and menopausal status, decide about the ovaries.
Yes. Okay.
So is there any role of endometrial ablation, Dr. Swati?
No, there is no role of endometrial ablation in perimenopausal AUB with hyperplasia, even if it is without atypia, because we need to go for regular follow-up, and after ablative procedures, there is tendency to form adhesions and access to endometrium will be difficult and for follow-up.
Right. Now, suppose it turned out to be atypical hyperplasia, then how you are going to manage? Dr. Sweta.
Yeah. Atypical hyperplasia, like there is more chance of underlying malignancy to the tune of almost 33%, and even the progression to cancer is a bit fast here. So in these cases, the definitive treatment will be a total hysterectomy. Now there are certain points which we need to consider here. One, like we go for a total hysterectomy, not subtotal here. Secondly, do not try to attempt morcellation because dissemination of malignant cells. Suppose if you even have a facility of intraoperative frozen section, but this is not recommended in these cases because there are studies which have shown that even in frozen section you are getting a typical hyperplasia, but later it turns out to be a carcinoma case. So it's not recommended. And even that lymphadenectomy is also not recommended as such, because it is said that these cases, even if carcinoma is present, they are very early stage endometrial cancer, which has got a very high, less chance of lymph vascular space invasion. So there is no definitive role of doing lymphadenectomy in all the cases. So,
how should endometrial hyperplasia be managed in
But I
women
think
wishing to
we
conceive?
should always do an MRI for these cases before doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, it is better.
Sir, can you take this question? Dr. Dolly is absent. How should endometrial hyperplasia be managed in women wishing to conceive? Anyone? Yes, sir, please.
So actually, for the endometrial hyperplasia, so it's depending on the severity of the histology. So if the histology is not, much, progress, and the chance of being malignancy is not high, I think, we may try to use the medical treatment before deciding for surgery. So it depends on how severe the pathology or the histology of the hyperplasia.
Yes, sir, rightly said, but what the evidence says that at least one sample should show there is regression. And because there is time is less, we have to stop the progesterone for that much time, so refer to the fertility specialist. What should be the type of conception? Anyone?
ART will be better, ma'am.
We should try for conception very fast, because they conceive very soon. So they should be sent to the ART expert and should be asked for an IVF.
Because endometrial hyperplasia itself hampers the implantation. Okay, right. And how should women not undergoing hysterectomy in case of atypical hyperplasia be followed up?
Madam, she is not refusing for hysterectomy. She is refusing for hysterectomy, so we have to do an endometrial aspiration or sampling more sooner than the previous one. Previously, we were without hyperplasia, we were doing in 6 months. Here, we have to do earlier, every 3 months. And if she is still not responding, then after 2 biopsies, we have to again convince her that there are chances of malignancy. It is better you go ahead for an hysterectomy. So we have to tell her.
Sir, your expert comment about this case?
So I have like 2-3 points to discuss. First, the perimenopausal bleeding is not uncommon.
No, sir, case one.
Yes, case one.
Which we have covered, sir, already.
Pardon?
Sir, the case one, expert comment about that case. If you want to add something, which we have
just
discussed
want to add something for the
endometrial hyperplasia.
Yes, exactly. In the perimenopausal bleeding, it's not uncommon. However, although the proportion of, detecting the cancer in these abnormal bleeding women is not very high. It's like 1 to 3%. But if the women, had the cancer, it is fatal. So that's why it is very important to get a detailed, history, particularly the bleeding pattern. For the regular bleeding pattern with the heavy men's bleeding, the chance of having malignancy will not as high as women who present with irregular bleeding off and on, like what we call menometrorrhagia. So in that case, together with some of the clinical risk factors that you mentioned, the obesity, hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and so on.
Corpus cancer syndrome.
That chance of being a cancer is higher. So you already discussed about the way to make a diagnosis and to get the histological proof whether it is cancer or not. And my second comment is that I would not recommend the observation.
Yes,
Since
sir, you are right.
One is like
they have said that you can consider, but prefer the treatment with progesterone.
Exactly. That is very important, particularly, in some settings. It's very not, a usual, a way that women will come back to see you.
Yes.
She come back to see you when she get the malignancy.
Thank you so much, sir, for your
you.
expert comments. Now I hand over the mic to Dr. Pooja Patil for the second case.
So good afternoon to all of you. We have discussed in detail about AUBM. Now, the second case is Mrs. X. She's 35-year-old age, and she comes to you with postmenstrual spotting since 8 to 10 days, and she is very disturbed with her symptoms. The bleeding is dark-colored blood, and she does not have significant pain along with that. She has already taken tranexamic acid and OC pills, but she is not relieved of her symptoms. Her OBS history is that she had previous 2 cesarean section 10 years and 8 years back, and BMI of 28. Family history of diabetes is there, and on per vaginal examination, the uterus is bulky, non-tender, and USG, which was done transabdominally in her village, was normal, showed normal size uterus with ET of 8 mm. Now, over to you, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am. What FIGO notation would you like to give to this case?
First of all, we have to know what is the diagnosis, because I think unless we establish the diagnosis, because it goes with the notation, goes with the etiology of this. And we know in the PALM coin, PALM is all structural and coin is all mostly functional.
So ma'am, USG
but
shows
here,
in her village.
Here, coming to
normal.
this case, with the previous 2 cesareans and slightly younger patient, I would say, not exactly perimenopausal, but even a little younger patient. And what you have said is postmenstrual bleeding. Generally, this postmenstrual pattern and the intermenstrual pattern comes with a previous history of cesarean. We can think of, which is not, now only we are realizing that there could be a niche in the cesarean section, what we call as an isthmocele. So maybe that is the reason. But unless we establish, we won't be able to give a notation. But if we are thinking of isthmocele, then perhaps we should give, recently only they have included in the AUBN, but earlier it was either AUBE, or some even said it is AUBI, an iatrogenic cause. Though not every time there is an iatrogenic potential to it, it also depends on the patient's characteristics.
So since she had menstrual complaint and USG done at her village was normal, we will label it as AUBE, maybe most
at
probably
this
the
stage,
endometrial pathology. So we got a TVS done for the patient, and we found in the TVS that there was an anterior lower uterine segment. Niche was there, triangular niche was present, and the residual myometrial thickness over that defect was only 2.5 mm. So as you were suspecting that a niche can be there, so this patient has niche, so now the
it is
notation
AUBN.
goes to be
But
AUBN.
only one controversy is generally coin is all functional and this is, but this is basically a structural defect, but still because it is not yet classified, it comes in AUBN.
So in FIGO
Madam,
2018,
sometime also it may come in AUBI also.
Iatrogenic, yeah.
FIGO 2018 has included it in AUBN now. So the next question is that only to Dr. Kartiga, that what all is included in AUBN?
So for like the previous case, that is isthmocele is included in AUBN, then arteriovenous malformation, endometrial pseudoaneurysms, myometrial hypertrophy, and chronic inflammatory conditions, chronic endometritis also included.
So these are the actually the options or the diagnoses which are made by the things which are being ruled out. The pathological structural causes are ruled out, and if we don't find any cause, then they are put into the AUBN or the causes which have not been studied much. So to differentiate between AUBE and N, we need a very good transvaginal sonography to pick up these defects or the causes which are there in the AUBN. We need a good TVS or a Doppler. So my question to Dr. Chitra, that how do you define isthmocele? Madam has gone, I think. So any one of you can define?
Isthmocele is basically a defect in scar. Previous cesarean section scar. It is only 1 or 2 millimeter defect in anterior myometrium. So basically in the lower uterine segment.
Yes, ma'am. So isthmo stands for the uterine isthmus and cele stands for the pouch which is being created in the cavity. And now there, in the Delphi consensus, it is classified as a disorder of caesarean scar disorder. And 2 symptoms, the one major symptom which is either the postmenstrual spotting or discomfort during the uterine bleeding. either one of the major symptom or two secondary symptoms like infertility and intrauterine fluid. If they are present, we label it as isthmocele. So, Dr. Nishi, question to you, what are the factors which are leading to this isthmocele nowadays? Before we didn't hear about this, but now it is very common.
Yes,
What is
ma'am.
the cause?
I think each one of us should be isthmocele minded nowadays. As the cesarean sections are increasing, that is the more the number of cesarean section, more is the chances of developing isthmocele. And everything which leads to an improper healed scar can lead to isthmocele. So if there are like multiple cesarean sections, or the cervical incision is given very low down, or the patient herself is having some risk factors like diabetes, obesity, which will not lead to a proper healing, can lead to that cesarean scar defect.
Any message you want to give to the young gynecologists what they should not do during the cesarean section?
Yeah, when we were going for cesarean section, very important thing which we can do is to give a proper closure to the abdomen. We should not hurry, we should not include the endometrium, we should not do a single layer closure, but it should be done in 2 layers so that we can give a proper strength to the scar to prevent the formation of isthmocele, because there are n number of patients coming to the OPD with chronic pelvic pain, and we don't look at the, we are not isthmocele minded till now. So we will very easily find a cause of their chronic pelvic pain and postmenstrual spotting.
So your
I think
technique
one
of
reason which we cannot really avoid too much is one of the factors which causes isthmocele is also when you do a cesarean in labor. Too much dilated, or even beyond 5-6 centimeters dilatation, or patient has been in labor for a pretty long time. So because we want to give trial of labor and then we take up for cesarean, so that is one factor where
Madam,
probably
what we can do, we should give the incision somewhat
a
higher.
little higher up.
Little higher incision.
Not
should be
close
given
to
in
the
that case,
cervical.
yes, because cervical mucus will hamper the healing.
Yeah.
So it should be somewhat higher.
Already that area is already hypoxic, so
Yeah.
the repair is very
Nowadays, cesarean, it is scar niche is more common in primiparous patient. So surgical suturing is very important in all
maybe
these cases.
nowadays the cause that we are taking, that is cesarean section on maternal request, because the lower segment is not formed, it is thick.
Yes, yes.
So therefore the approximation is not adequate, and that leads to niche formation, and also the adhesions formation. If the uterus is retroverted and adhesion is there, that there will be a pull on the scar, and therefore the niche formation
And I
also
think
happens.
single layer closure has come too
Yes,
much
so
into
they want
practice.
to do it fast.
So yeah.
The single layer closure
So-
they want to do to finish the CS fast.
मैडम
So
डिक्टम
that should
अब
not
ये
be
हो गया,
there.
जो भी काटा है उसको सिलो.
And in 2 layers. So that message we can
And
take.
a good hemostasis. I think
Hemostasis
that's
should be maintained and close the uterus in 2 layers. So we diagnosed this case by transvaginal ultrasound. So I want to know from Dr. Shalini if there are another diagnostic modalities which can tell us about this isthmocele.
Yeah. There are so many modalities. First of all, we all do TVS. So it is a very good modality. But sometimes it is a 2D thing, which is very common. So in 2D, we cannot see all the recesses and all the corners of that defect. Uska shape kya hai? It is whether it is rounded or triangular, or where the RMT is less or more. So for proper assessment, for proper tissue characterization, MRI is best. But even if we are well versed with SIS, that is also a very good tool to delineate the things. And of course, we can always do a 3D reconstruction of the scar dehiscence defect.
So 3D
But in this,
ultrasound.
the RMT, we should always take in 3 dimensions. In all the dimensions, we should take RMT to properly plan the surgery, whether it is a laparoscopic repair or hysteroscopic repair. Otherwise, we may land up in troubles. So it is a very important aspect. So to take the RMTs, and tell your sonologist, if you are not doing, then take the RMT properly in every aspects. So I will need some expert comment from sir also.
Sir, you want
Yes,
to say
yes.
something?
I have 2 points for the isthmocele case. First, the prevalence is increasing globally, not just only in India, but everywhere because of increasing cesarean section. So I would say modern gynecologists should keep in mind and well aware of this condition. That, in women with some abnormal bleeding, with the pattern you already presented, like the spotting after having a period, maybe this. And in my experience, if you are well aware and you keep in mind of this condition, the transvaginal ultrasound carefully can detect. And you may do some follow-up. There's no need to send for some sophisticated, investigation like the MRI. And the second, the treatment depends on how severe it is and how the symptoms the woman experience, either in medical treatment or surgical treatment. Thank you.
So TVS is available nowadays in the peripheral also, so it can be done to identify this condition. So once you have known now cystocele is there, madam, Dr. Swati madam, how do you want to manage it now? What are the options? Just quick decision how we will go forward with the management.
The management of isthmocele depends upon three factors. One is the symptomatology of the patient. If she is asymptomatic, then we can leave her. Secondly, her planning to conceive. If she is planning to conceive in future and if we see isthmocele, then definitely we would like to resuture that area. And thirdly, the residual myometrial thickness. If it is less than 3 millimeter, or the thickness of the RMT helps us to decide the route we can choose. If the RMT is less than 3 millimeter, then if it is more than 3 millimeter, we can go by hysteroscopic approach by just excising the distal margin and ablating the endometrial tissue in it. That is the pouch which is being created, we need to widen it and ablate the endometrium. And secondly, by the laparoscopic approach would be the gold standard. We have to excise the area and resuture it in 2 layers properly.
Yes,
we
so
can combine it also using the transillumination technique by the hysteroscope, and we can locate the area and suture it properly.
So RMT and the willingness of the patient to conceive, these are the two factors which will make us decide whether we have to go for the hysteroscopic approach or transabdominal approach. And both also can be done in some methods where you can see from the, you can just put the hysteroscope and the light can be seen. You just close the laparoscopic lights and you can see the defect then and there, and it can be seen where the defect actually is. So both approaches, both laparoscope and hysteroscope also can be used, or only hysteroscope, laparoscope approaches can be used for this. So that is about the isthmocele. Now over to you, ma'am.
So now coming to case 3. Mrs. K, 48 years, para 2, had breast cancer treatment 2 years back and is on tamoxifen therapy. She was on regular follow-up, complained of heavy regular menstrual bleeding since 2 months. On evaluation, ultrasound showed endometrial thickening of 12 millimeter. Medical oncologist has sent her for further evaluation to you. So what is the FIGO notation? Mamta ma'am.
Since she is on medication for cancer prevention, breast cancer prevention, and she is having now heavy menstrual bleeding, because of that it would be AUBI, it is iatrogenic, and it has been seen that the perimenopausal woman with tamoxifen therapy, about the chances of heavy menstrual bleeding with endometrial hyperplasia is more than 30%. And she has already, the hyperplasia is almost 12 millimeters, so the presence of endometrial pathology would be 100%. So it is preferable to do immediate endometrial sampling.
So which endometrial thickness is abnormal, Dr. Shelley?
Since she is on tamoxifen therapy and here it's written 4.7 mm, so this is well within range, because when she is on any therapy, like the normal ranges are post-menopausal women, the cutoff value is 3. But if she is more than, less than 5 years, it's 4 mm.
Yes.
And then otherwise, for tamoxifen it is 8, nearly
Slightly
8
higher,
mm.
yes.
Yeah, and the measurement has to be from inner to inner
So tamoxifen
border.
basically leads to endometrial hyperplasia and abnormal uterine bleeding. We should always counsel the patient about that. So what is the risk of developing endometrial hyperplasia on this therapy, adjuvant therapy for breast cancer, especially with tamoxifen, Bharti?
Yeah. There is strong possibility of having endometrial hyperplasia in such patient because the drug used is tamoxifen, and tamoxifen is selective estrogen receptor modulator. It inhibits the proliferation of breast cancer cell by antagonistic effect, but it has got agonistic effect on endometrium. So it may lead to endometrial proliferation, may lead to formation of polyp, hyperplasia, and sometimes endometrial carcinoma also.
And it also depends upon the dose and duration of tamoxifen, you know. And after stopping, the endometrial thickness reduces also because it is iatrogenic. So we should counsel the patient that this can happen. This I have already told you. So should women on tamoxifen be treated with prophylactic progesterone therapy? What do you think? Dr. Sweta.
Yeah. It's like when we use LNG-IUS, so we know that yes, it will prevent endometrial polyp formation as well as the hyperplasia. But if we think of that way, that if we put LNG-IUS, whether there will be any effect on the breast cancer recurrence,
Yes.
we don't have many studies on it. So that is why it is not recommended to give
At present
any
it is not
prophylactic.
recommended. So what other we can use apart from tamoxifen?
We can use aromatase
Yes,
inhibitors.
rightly said. We can use aromatase inhibitors.
So may I
So
add
how
one thing,
should
madam?
how should women who develop endometrial hyperplasia while on tamoxifen treatment for breast cancer be managed, Dr. Dolly? Hani, yes, you were saying something.
Yeah. If patient need this type of receptor therapy, whether it is tamoxifen or whether letrozole, then if mostly diagnostically, if we are comfortable, patient is asymptomatic, we should not worry too much about the endometrial hyperplasia because we also estimate the myometrial stromal glandular changes.
Yes, because these are the main changes which occurs.
Yes, so
and
it
our
is
pathologist should know that.
exactly. So it is always overestimated the thickness. So asymptomatic, no question of biopsy. Even if patient is symptomatic, even if the thickness is 20 mm, we may not get any findings. So the drug should be continued in favor of proper treatment of breast cancer.
But oncologist's opinion should always
Yes,
be taken.
we should always take oncologist in our loop, and the patient should be informed and counseled that you are on tamoxifen, so you should be taking proper counseling and follow-ups is very must, and you should be compliant and very regular to that.
And again here morphology is again important.
Yes.
How is the endomyometrial junction? What is the whether it is heterogeneous, homogeneous? You know.
Exactly.
So morphology is very important in all these cases.
And mostly 20% of the cases in these patients are having mostly polyps.
Yeah.
Or hyperplasia. So chances of CA is very less than 1%, even what literature says. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Any expert comment on this case?
Yes, just only a short comment that in women, before starting tamoxifen treatment, it is recommended she should have the first, pelvic examination and transvaginal ultrasound to see the baseline and follow up every, depending on the guideline, but in some places every 6 months, to see the progress or the change of the endometrium. This is important. If not, if you wait until women present with abnormal bleeding, it may be too late.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now I hand over the mic for the last case to Dr. Pooja Patil.
So this is a 41-year-old para 3 life 3 has come to you with heavy menstrual bleeding since past 6 months. Her cycles are regular, which last for 5 days. She had previous 3 full-term cesarean section. Last one was 10 years back, and TT was done along with that. Her BMI is 32. On examination, per abdomen, it is soft. Per speculum, there is no abnormality. And per vaginal examination, uterus is anteverted, 10 to 12 week size, firm, mobile, and fornixes are clear. So, Dr. Karthika, what are your differential diagnoses by the symptoms and by the examination findings?
So 41-year-old obese patient with enlarged uterus. So probably she might be having a structural cause for her heavy menstrual bleeding. Can be a fibroid or a adenomyosis. So other details we need to know whether uterus is uniformly enlarged, whether tenderness is there. So if uterine tenderness is there, it may point towards adenomyosis. So for confirmation, we have to do further evaluation.
So how do you want to evaluate? How do you want to confirm your diagnosis?
So for confirmation, ultrasound will be preferred. So transvaginal sonography will be the better choice. So in fibroid, you can see hypoechoic mass. Suppose there is degeneration, further changes will be there. So adenomyosis, we can diagnose by MUSAC criteria.
Yes, so transvaginal ultrasound is the best compared to the transabdominal ultrasound for this patient, as she is obese also. So, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Verma madam, Srishta Shadri madam, sorry. What are the MUSA criteria? Now it has been included in FIGO 2018
Yeah,
guidelines.
the MUSA criteria was started off with 2015 and then revised 2018, then 21, 22, and they said nowadays it's not just enough if you say there is adenomyosis. You need to do a full evaluation. So they said morphological uterine ultrasound assessment, sonographic assessment, that is what MUSA means. And they said you will have to describe both direct and indirect factors, but the criteria will be where is exactly the adenomyotic lesion and whether it is occupying the entire uterus or it is to which side, upper part or outside or inside, whatever the detailed structural analysis. And also the ultrasound can give you about the junctional zone. And you can see the endometrial glands as well in the myometrium. That is what basically the adenomyosis is. So they said you will have to describe in entirety what are the direct factors would be when you see the endometrial glands in the myometrium, and the other criteria like uterus also becomes enlarged, the junctional zone disappears, and it becomes showing other features of this because a muscular hypertrophy happens. So all this will come in the indirect criteria as the resultant effect of the endometrial glands invading into this.
So sometimes we get the ultrasound report showing myometrial cyst.
Yeah,
they don't write
so-
it as adenomyosis. So we should understand
And whether
that
the
actually
vasculature is intervened and all those. So it's just a detailed assessment of just not telling that there is an adenomyosis, but in entirety, in totality, so that you can really pinpoint the management.
Basically, I want to add one line over this, that question mark sign of the uterus. Because of the mostly posterior adenomyosis is more common, and always mostly in few cases both are sisters, adenomyosis and endometriosis, so there may be associated endometriosis of POD. So this sign is very important while we do our scans, plus the rain shower appearance, the subendometriotic cyst. These are very typical. Even if we do not remember the whole criteria, these 2-3 things we should remember. The Venetian bands.
fan-shaped
Yeah,
acoustic
exactly.
shadow that we
Venetian
see.
bands and this subendometriotical cyst. These 2 things are very typical of adeno.
So we did a TVS for this patient, and the TVS showed that there is a 5 centimeter type 4 fibroid. And I would like to know from Dr. Preet Agarwal, madam, what are the factors to be considered when you are choosing a treatment for such patient?
Ma'am, she's a 41-year-old P3L3. So the treatment depends definitely on the patient's choice. Some patient at 41 will tell you do a hysterectomy for me. Some will tell remove my fibroids. Some will tell I don't want any surgery. So first of all, we have to take into the patient's consideration, and also whether the patient will come for follow-up or not, and the affordability of the patient. So with this, taking a good endometrial sampling, if there is no cancerous or precancerous thing, is the atypical hyperplasia is not there, then we can put off an LNG IUG that will reduce the symptoms, but the size of the fibroid will not change with that. Or you can go for a myomectomy, laparoscopy or open, or a hysterectomy also you can do with or without ovaries. Usually only salpingectomy will be enough. But she is obese also.
She is obese.
She is
she
obese, so
previous
better
3
to
CS.
remove the ovaries also, ma'am.
She is previous 3 CS patient, so we have to look for the comorbidities along with the patient's preference. We have to explain to her the comorbidities which are associated with the surgical treatment, so that she can make her choice correct. So it depends on the bleeding pattern also, how much that bleeding is disturbing
and
the
if
patient.
she wants contraception, so we can add the progesterone pills also, ma'am, for her.
So now NICE has recommended for HMB, if there is no pathology, structural pathology in the uterus, or if the fibroid is less than 3 centimeter, or if it comes out to be adenomyosis, first treatment of choice should be LNG IUS, as you rightly said, madam. And for fibroids more than 3 centimeter, we can have the non-hormonal and the hormonal. So we'll quickly go through the drugs which are available for the fibroid treatment. So to Dr. Chitra Jain, madam is not there, so anyone can tell. We are very commonly using this tranexamic acid. So just the dosage any common or very important side effect or contraindication that we have, and what is the recommendation, whether we should use it or not?
So yeah, it is the first line. We all know that doses are 3 to 4 grams per day. So we start with less doses like 2 grams. It reduces blood loss by 40 to 50%, but it does not decreases the size of the fibroid. We should keep that in our mind. And yes, the thing is, mostly the things are, contraindications are VTEs, with thromboembolic events, but still for short term it will not cause any harm. And few side effects we should keep in mind, apart from gastritis, the breast tenderness, the dysmenorrhea and all. This should be explained to the patient.
So all of us should remember that the contraindication for we are giving day in and day out the tranexamic acid. We should take the history from the patient. If there is any family history of VTE or patient self has any history of VTE, that should be taken. Thromboembolic disease if there is in the family. So we should not give tranexamic acid to that patient. So, Dr. Shalini Jain, I want to know from you about the progestin. This drug is also very commonly used by gynecologists. So, which progesterone, what are the routes available, and just the dosage?
So yeah, we can give oral, intramuscular and LNG IUS. Oral we can use till 6 to 7 months we can use safely. So they are the first line, 2-3 kinds of progesterone. Mostly we use norethistron. It has good hemostatic properties, but safety wise medroxyprogesterone is more safer for long term use. And yes, for injections we need to give add-back therapies, depot preparations, and patient should be explained regarding the spotting and irregular bleeding pattern. That should be kept in mind.
So progesterones are cost effective also.
Yeah,
we have to think about the cost also.
And even LNG IUS is the first choice because patient responds very well, and contraception part is also taken care of. And the organic lesions will also be taken care of, like adeno and everything.
But the problem is that it will cause irregular bleeding. So you have to counsel the patient very well that she has to tolerate a irregular bleeding for another 3 to 6 months, and then she'll be aware
so
about
after
that.
6 months it will all settle down, mostly if she responds to. But only thing to be kept in mind is expulsion in few cases.
Yes, so we have to select the cases properly. The uterus size should not be very big. It should be less than 12 weeks. And the cavity should not be distorted if we are going to put a LNG IUS. So, Dr. Shaili Modi, do you prefer combined oral contraceptives?
For this case, we don't think we should advise this oral contraceptive pills because as such also the fibroid volume is so big that it's not going to anyways change it. So it should not be advocated, and if she is concerned, then it should not be given universally because also as you said, thromboembolic phenomena is a concern. So since she is getting into her 40s.
So when we are deciding about the COCs, we have to see the age of the patient and the comorbidities. If she is obese and she is a smoker, after 35 we should not prescribe COC to the patient because she is at risk of thromboembolic disorders and cardiovascular events. So Dr. Swati Sharma, what is your opinion about the GnRH analogs?
GnRH agonist and antagonist both are available. Agonists could be Zolodex or Leuprolide depots. They are available, which can be given monthly or once in 3 months. The two main advantages is that it definitely gives a better symptomatic control, and secondly, it also shrinks the fibroid size and the adenomyotic size. But
Any side
the
effect?
disadvantage is that it causes the hypoestrogenic problems. That is the main, and the cost factor. They are very costly.
So we can give it along with add-back therapy if we want to give, but it is a very short-term treatment that we can give with the GnRH agonist. What about GnRH antagonist?
Antagonists, recently many preparations are available which are orally can be given, like elagolix and relugolix. Relugolix is available with the add-back therapy, which covers the hypoestrogenic problems, which are both the drugs are FDA approved, so they can be used.
Yes, so they can be given for a long-term treatment. That is a good thing, and they are given orally. So it is more patient is more compliant to the oral drugs, and but the cost is the problem with the GnRH analogs. It will cost around 2,000 to 4,000 per month is the treatment cost that the patient has to face. And the recommendations for elagolix, these are the 20-25 meta-analysis, they recommend, they say that they alter the uterine fibroid size also and reduce the menstrual bleeding also. So for both relugolix and for elagolix, they are being approved by the, for the treatment of fibroid. Now quickly about SPRM, selective progesterone receptor modulators.
One line only.
One line. Which drug?
Two
dose?
progesterone receptor modulators, mifepristone and uripristal. Uripristal is the most controversial drug. Many times it has been introduced and then withdrawn because of the...
So do you recommend uripristal now?
Now it has got very, very strict indication only for women who are not eligible for surgery and any other medical treatment, only in those patients and single course.
So NICE says that if the patient is not able for a UAE, uterine artery embolization, then only you can give. Otherwise it is not recommended. It has been out from the
from the drug registry.
It has been
Severely
retracted.
restricted,
Yes.
very severe restriction.
Mifepristone, what is the dose and for how long you would like to
It can
give?
be given 5 milligram, 10 and 25 mg as well.
So
And
5 milligram is expected. So here we can see that the drugs which reduce the fibroid volume are the GnRH analogs and the SPRMs only, and the other drugs, they do not decrease the fibroid volume. So we can decide according to the patient's requirement.
Sorry boys of this hall, we end with this slide. Menstruation, menopause, mental breakdowns. Notice how all women's problem begin with men. So now
Sir,
we expect message from all of you. Start from the expert.
Just one liner, what take home message you would like to give to our audience?
Okay.
For any type of,
I think it
for
is
AUB.
Complex hyperplasia and endometrial carcinoma. These are two serious causes of perimenopausal AUB. So always exclude these two conditions by endometrial sampling.
Next.
So I would like to say that don't be feared up for the hyperplasia or any malignancy. It is not an organ to be removed after 35 or 40 or simple DUB, which can be treated with 3 to 6 cycles of progesterone. And don't be feared up for follow-ups also. So follow-up is a must, and hysterectomy is not the always option. So these two messages to all the women.
Only one.
For me, conserve uterus should be
Yes,
our prime
we are
target,
with you
which
in
and
that.
our counseling can avert many of those problems.
Follow proper techniques during cesarean section to prevent isthmocele.
To prevent it. Right.
And anybody just don't start hormones without doing an endometrial sampling, because so many practitioners are there, they just start empirically, a patient comes with bleeding, they start norethistron without doing a proper endometrial sampling.
The way we understand pictorially better, the same way these kind of pictures we can put in OPD for the patient to see that this is the problem, so that the counseling can be effective, and tell them that this is the cause, so they can
Educate the
patient.
patient.
Right.
Please do not underestimate the power of per speculum examination, because that is the only way we can rule out cervical diseases in abnormal uterine bleeding.
Right. Perimenopause is a roller coaster ride for many women. So while dealing with perimenopausal AUB, we should not forget some other issues like vasomotor symptoms and prevention, like cardiovascular disease prevention, osteoporosis prevention, cancer screening. All those things we also should not forget, and many hysterectomies can be prevented at this age if we know the endocrinology of perimenopause.
I think perimenopause, we keep saying the problems are, say for example, fibroid, endometriosis, they are all hormone dependent. So the moment you enter into menopause, this is going to disappear. So that is not 100% true, because although the estrogens are withdrawn, but then there are, if especially patient is a little obese or something, estrogen is still there, and that propagates the fibroid. So keep a watch, even if you allow her on medical management and allow her to continue into menopause, keep a watch on her perimenopausal status and try to again identify.
I want to emphasize on the N part of the palm coin, that not otherwise classified is also an important cause, and we should always be AV malformation minded and isthmocele minded whenever we are looking at a patient of AUB.
Thank you so much for being the excellent panelist, and thank you, sir, for the expert opinions that you have given.
And for the PGs, please start using FIGO system 1, 2 and notations. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for the
Thank you all
opportunity.
the panelists.